Sanje
Jordan to be John Amla, Janju Suchi, Dagi Junior Gibe, Dokam, Jonam and Sanjay Lupa.
Sanje
Jordan to be John Amla, Janju Baru, Suchi, Dagi Junior Gibe, Dokam, Jonam and Sanjay Lupa.
Sanje
to be John Amla, Janju Baru, Dagi Suchi, Dagi Junior Gibe, Dokam.
Tayata, Gade, Para, Bodhi, Soha, Tayata, Para, Bodhi, Tayata, Para, Songa, Bodhi, Ola so simja tamjega dodo topjala na machiba sanje ko morum boje chineje tobacha di chedo ne be janju semba labjana tsuche de nyang langwa la shingo shimbala tobala tuje shu mano wa ko de an ka so bawa de kese chembo shi wala zeba junju de ne cheche timi ningi samsacha.
We begin by setting our motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the purest state of enlightenment in order to benefit sentient beings. And we know that to attain such a state, we must perfect all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfect them in turn, we need to have a good knowledge of what they are about. And to gain this knowledge, we must be able to rely upon an unmistaken source of that knowledge. And so it is with this in mind that we are here to listen to the amazing text known as the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, composed by the great master Shantideva.
Koskolo 소신제 세다고 해서 아니 랑게 동게 난칼라 뭐랑게 진짜 자야 라마 임벌 나바 탑jel라 투제 전부도 담아 라마 샤제 투바지 세다 근데 라마 샤제 투바데 가서도다 샤제 차니 아니 예산에 냠샤게 되고 도세는 막 굴러 추고 뭐미가 또 장소 안배 무슨 하는 랑게 동게 난칼라 쇼요 상자 같은 거 공부하자.
And likewise, we set up the merit field in the space in front of us, the merit field of, in actual fact, our own root guru, in the aspect of Shakyamuni Buddha. And Shakyamuni Buddha has one face, two hands. He is seated in the Vajra posture with the right hand in the earth-touching mudra, the left hand in the meditative equipoise mudra, holding an alms bowl filled with nectar. And we actually have that understanding that the Buddha is really present, really there in front of us. And also we visualize that in the space all around us are all kind mother sentient beings without exception.
And Lama Shaja Tsering and the Chivo Omkabo, Jamba Amabo, Tuga Humbus, Igasum set up, Tuga Hunle, and it was a part of Mabatun, Shingrajan, Ishiba Onla the Shava Chenta, Ishiba de, and the Lama Tuben Ombe Naba Chenta, and only Ongo Chulama to the Mujiba Ujanet, what is Komasha.
We also visualize that central figure that we are visualizing, the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, is marked by the three syllables, Om at the crown, A at the throat, and Hung at the heart center. The light rays emanate from the Hung at the heart center, going out into the pure realms, inviting back the wisdom beings and the empowering deities. The wisdom beings come and dissolve into the central figure, and the empowering deities, initiate with the nectar of empowerment, some of which overflows at the crown, producing spontaneously the figure of Akshobhya.
What is it? And Lama to be on book, and it's a cushion to go in that teacher. That Yundeta, Taganishige, and then Garazo to the Tuja, Garazo to the Lam, Garazo to the Mobas of Sanja Yinza, and it's a Garazo to a Pachisitic. And be round that Chicasoda. Marazu Dola and the chick because of the touch of to be cheto and go back over Sanja the way much what in the more to a chechen and some little cover chechen and the chick 대인도 아니 랑게 타고도 막을 심지 탐제자 아니 가서래 지가서데 리주소서 동네 녀시가 나바 민나시 말아서네 남주유게 나바 투벽고 윤대체네 아니 봐 지금 제도 몇바 여기 다음에 봐 이시게 또 홍원도 그때 와서부터 좀 제대로 공부해.
So then we begin this sense of appreciation for the wonderful enlightened qualities of the Buddha in front of us, the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, the Buddha who, for our sake, generated the mind of enlightenment initially, for our sake, solely just practiced on the path, and for our sake, solely manifested complete enlightenment. And so we have this sense of really taken in and in care of the Buddha, that is for us all that the Buddha attained that state of enlightenment. And that for all the sentient beings all around us, though they are the denizens of the 6 realms of existence, they are able to cognize their situation here with a human intelligence. And so they also have this sense of appreciation for the main figure in the merit wheel, develop that pure faith, that faith of conviction and manifest faith.
어디를 공부해? 다 들리는데 아니 지금 가서래. 아니 지금 돈바 투배 공부 연대전에 돈바 투배 공부를 미베 지금 다외대 이제 공부도 그때 봐. 아니 심전 남게 동에 나출라선다. 라한다 고군에서 동에 나출되게 삼르다도 아니 대달을 미베. 다 가져 지금 가서래. 동에다 동에 주다 잡았잖아. 지모를 저와 휴지 저와 규제 저와 다게 지금 대다 전에 라마 투배하고 챙길라도 공부해. 다른 시간 대화도 대외 주다 되는 지모를 대바 규제 대바 쇼제. 아니 대바 다게 지금 대다 전에 라마 투배하고 챙길라도 다른 시간 심제 탐자 아니 지금 가서는 다 가서는 지금 그래서 대화도 대외 주도 좀 맞는 지모를 미저와 규제 미저와 쇼제 미저와 다게 지금 대다 전에 라마 투배하고 챙길라도 아니 대다 심제 대다다 일이 차단이다 저 단열은 다 대다 탐제 용어 되게도 용어래 일이 차단다 저와 좀 뭐는 용어 내가 있어 일이 차단다 저 단열은 집을 내가 주제 내가 쇼 내가 다 지금 대다 전에 라마 투배 뭐 증길라도 소 전에 공부했네 라마 투배 뭐 꿀래 주제난가 왜서 저 규모 통화면 어디 봐도 저 켜봐도냐 세매시가 또 받죠 봐도 줘 뒤버티고 나니니 맞된 채소 선서 공부했어 근데 세매시가 또 켜봐 제 집에 바자 켜봐지 라시 심제 탐제 있길래 샤수 선서 공부했어.
So it's in really immersing ourselves really in this appreciation of the qualities of enlightenment that brings forth this sense of faith, this pure faith, this manifest faith, this faith of conviction. And so that from our side, we have this focus of deep appreciation, and also the focus on the varied sufferings that all those sentient beings all around us are undergoing. And so because of this, then we think how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and its causes. May this be the case. I will definitely see to it that it is the case. So Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. And how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. May this be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. So Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. Also, how wonderful if all sentient beings have the happiness that knows no suffering and the excellent bliss of liberation. May this be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. So Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. And finally, knowing how all of the just stated immeasurable thoughts are reliant upon equanimity. We pray also how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free of attachment and anger that hold some close and others distant, and so abide in equanimity. And may this be the case. I will see that it is the case. So Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. So from this sense of really powerful supplication and promise to really pull off the immeasurable thoughts, the descending nectar light that descends from the Guru Buddha from the heart center, entering to ourselves and all sentient beings, initially purifying ourselves of all negativity and particularly all obstacles to our being able to perfect the four immeasurable thoughts. And then we are endowed with this special imprint to quickly realize the full import of the four immeasurable thoughts.
어디를 공부하셔 어디를 쳐 아니 어디를 쳐는 다 간제 저기 그래 다 된데 인도 다 심제 탐제 대화 탐제 또 동의 주다 대화 원은 뭐다 된데 지금 다 거서대 응하라 주고 다 뒤체도 다 취지고 요 인상 뭐다 간제 지금 된데 인도 다 간제 저기 심제 탐제 그 아니 저기 동의 주다 대화 탐제다 대바지 대바 저기 다 된데 제도 발로 다 저기 거서도 다 간제 저기 로다 심제 탐제 라 이도 가지고 고고도 왔습니다. 니보시 고고도 왔지만 제토에 거라면도가 니리 차다 매겐게 아니 심제 탐제라베 이동화 통도 고고도 로한테 인상 어저 균내명아 동에는 마시에 텐트 딘소스게 숨데 시울 개침 버려도 와 아니 대중지도 아니 이동화 용어 이바로 와 맞는데 이동화 용어 저도 때는 아니 대동에 동에 나와라 미스베 니제 용어도 와 아니 대화대 때도 그 잡아 용어도 와 용어도 와 다 디게도 규디게도 뭐도 줬으나 아니 텔레테나다 동에서와 얘기지게 대화 때만 얘기지게 스파 제가 저도 다 심제 탐제에서 심제 지게 대화 탐제 때만 동에 탐제 저거 제마도 왔어 버려 다 대대 제도에 누가도 술어줬으나 오늘 심제도 토이게 람랑 뭐 봐서 산지 봐다 콩고 고마도는 또 가서는 콩게 되제 감도 몇번 바라냐와 지다화시도 ken게 여봐자 지제 심제가 돌아 맞아 매와 인자 심제가 돌아 차대는 차대죠 심지가 된주베치도 차와 차대도 아니 된데서 다 대공만 마도나 타면도 쓰는 심지 탐지 산제 공부 주어치기 예스 아니 대체도 주발라 아니 계속 주발라고 요러 제대선 주주고 주는 얘기 선자전 도바투베 공부 남다되게 되는 검 심명안에 뭐다 주주고 주는 세제 어들지
So this is a beautiful sentiment of wishing all sentient beings to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, that all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And that after all, this is the reason why we engage in spiritual practice. This is the whole point of practicing the Dharma. So it's kind of so important that we gain this sense of closeness to all sentient beings. And you know that in that context of the 6 cause and effect instruction of seeing all sentient beings as one's mother, of a really seeing the kindness of the mother, wishing to repay that kindness, leading them to that sense of a sense of affectionate closeness to all sentient beings, which is really the foundation for the compassion that removes suffering, the cause of suffering of all sentient beings, and the love that is able to endow all sentient beings with love and the causes of happiness and the causes of happiness. And so this is kind of grounded on that sense of overall sense of deep appreciation and affection and closeness to all sentient beings. And that you know, we have this tremendous determination and aspiration to remove, on the one hand, all suffering of all sentient beings, and on the other, endow all sentient beings with happiness and its causes. But you know, the reality is that we can't do this for one sentient being. But we do know that from the point of view of enlightenment, that the Buddha has that power, that capacity to do so, because of the subtle understanding of the different dispositions of the situations of all sentient beings, and not least because of that single-pointed determination to work solely for the sentient beings, to bring that about. And so therefore we have that certainty that we ourselves must attain that state of mind, that perfection of mind, to best be able to work for sentient beings. And this is really why, this is at the heart of why we're here today, to listen to these words of the great Bodhisattva Shantideva, to the Bodhisattva's way of life, and to really gain that training necessary to reach that point.
어디죠? 그래서 좀 가발려.
Shokran the Gyatang Ship Gu the Niba Dungel Gombala Penyu Sambala.
모두 당우지다 소벨리 붙니 나래도 단이바 내 갑도도 쉬셔게 말면 단이바 동아고메 페인 삼발라서 동에 그래 당우도 삼로 땅 마시나 동에 중나 아니 마기바차 아니 딜레테네 아니 동에 무트는 용에 규시 줍되기도 와 이내 거지가 삼로 땅 심바이나 아니 동해 중알라 때네 야 가서래 가서대 동해 중알라 때네 아니 가서래 야 가서대 동해 중화당 아니 동해들 삼로당 올라 때네 가서대 삼로당시나 야고 편도 유에 되겠지 뭐 되는 거 열받아 그 뒤터네 동해 중알라 때네 저 먼저 가서다 positive negative는 positive는 삼로당 와 있나 동해들 때네 야 동해 방얘기 튕게 두에 안에 동해도 뭐처네 심제실에 이제 깨다 내 키면 뭐지 열받아 라 동해 중얼 때 뒤냠로는 신 동을 개발해 미스바 동 미스바 용어도에 들은 거라 다 삼로 부수도 보다는 안에 들려되는 뭐 개발자 안에 수살지에다 녀다 먹보제 용어도 보다 삼로 당신도 마신 개발와 다 삼로 당신 뭐 이나 동해 중화들 연대매 뭐 말했어 수고 열받아 니바 동해 건배 편유 삼반에서 자와래 동해 매버 년중매 대외 심지어 때문에 가도 대다 가나바 색다 채소 초안에 되면 수제 타바이 돈도다고 지치 다르지
So the next outline is the second of this set of outlines, which says the reflecting on suffering in terms of the benefits of such reflection. And that here it's taking it. If we really do not, reflect on suffering, if we have no thought of suffering, then, that suffering arises seemingly out of nowhere from our point of view. And it immediately has this powerful impact of, I cannot stand what's happening to me. I can't stand this suffering. And that's but if we do think about suffering, if we do reflect on it, there are benefits to be had through these experiences of suffering, not least of which is the capacity to abandon that suffering more readily, more quickly. And also, for example, the development of compassion for others, because through our own experience of suffering, we can understand what other people are going through when they suffer. So we can readily develop or cultivate compassion on the basis of our own suffering. And so, so this is kind of like the kind of benefits of suffering, as opposed to, the tight-minded attitude whereby suffering inevitably arises, then we are overwhelmed by that. Kind of the whole effect is exacerbated, and that we slide into despair, even to the point of people committing suicide and so on. So it's a kind of a decision we have to make with regard to where we stand when suffering inevitably arises. This then begins our looking at the text today, starting with the second half of verse number 12 and including verse number 13. Without suffering, there is no renunciation. Therefore, mind, you should stand firm. If some ascetics and the people of Karnapa endure the pain of cuts and burns for no reason, then for the sake of liberation, why have I no courage?
ruwa pena nga zo tuanpe namdala sine kingirwa pena tuanpa chomdente tanga dulu ju ondo chiba sanje chomdente te ane chiga kasore gebi geshe ne ane chulo pe ondo ane tendeke nawa tanga 개와다 아니 치와다 된데그 동에 세운데 될때네 아니 저 가서라다 코알은 게 봐주고 줄 때만 나와 다 뭐이네 저한테 연구요 다 상계 좀 된데다 단데디 나네 배는 대과 첨부 온도 제바이나 나 상계네 아니다 시방가를 시선다데 점을 저거고에 둘을 평원도 인데스 평원으로 와 평원을 때 이내 다디 말아서 다디 말아서 내 당보지 임바이네 왔다 된데지 통화이나 된데지 영화에 여바티 영화에 여바티 땡는 거 열와 그 동에 된데지 통화도 아니 동에 들라 지와실린 거와 동에디 아니 지와실린 왔다 동에디 매바서 해도 민도 매바서는 근데 속고도 당문에 동에 매바서 소에 대와 요건지마 이나 와 랭고와 왔다 되는 시대 왔다 되는데 저도 가서도 되는 시대 딱 안지 가서도 되는데 배나 저 가서도 저거 뭐저 대바 투모하다는 생각 좀 되다 대 로조 가와지 아니 되네 상계에 제바 때문도 제바때문도 왔다 타메에 남바치 땡제네 왔다 타메에 출제네 왔다지도 오늘 동해시 와라 때네 아니 대 아니 말에 동해도 연구를 했어 왔다 아니 다시는 돈 돌래 기 동해도 연구해 봐 캐온도 아니 때네 왔다 때려 다 탑지 갈도스 저도 아니 거 가서대 아니 지금 년중 거도 좀 왔다 아니 최주에 다 가서 두바데 되네 량으로 왔다 왔다 되래 가서 거기 민남주 전진바 있나 아니 동해들 때 동해 세계 탑진 것도 와 남주 매개지만은 다 동해 되게 맞지 봤잖아 양조 동해 태봤어네 모두는 동해 여기 교실 좀 연구도 와 어ten데도 어디서 그저 다 되는 영자 게데시나 아니 동해 시바나 코에 동해 삼바이나 로타페나 로 코에 동해 지 시바이나 코에 동해 로타 코에 동해 삼바 매벌 코랑 여버 게주 레타페나 나라조 세디 내나자다 동해 중에 되게디 와 세디 내다 지기로 다디 맞아 아니 개와 치마 편제 여바치 아니 딜레 아니 지금 당연 송고 동해라 소바디게 요래 달래 니바 사바나 달래 상고 사바 임바 이나양 코에기 내 상고 사바나 코알 원도 컴바토나 밀라 아니 차네 그래서 개가나 지금 동네 할라서는 치대 포와라 소베 다 하마일라 치대 포와 다 그 데벨 할라에 치대 포와라 소바 아니 하마일레 양 세단 컨트롤라 소베 된게 동네 유에 아니 순간다 소매가 하든서라 아니 가서데 네가서데 가서데 교회 동네에 요마데 잡아두지 그 동네 유에 되겠지 동네 풍부 여바 인사 야 남신나 레상비 편바서도 야 년소라 소바데 깨주고 요래 들 오다 동네도 교회 동네에서 통하도 아니 들라때네 아니 년중 계시도 와 년중 계시고도 와 들라때도 되네 다 가와이네 오늘은 기바지 민도 근데 인바자 뒤 주가리샤 째줘네 근데 째줘한테 아니 그데 아니 가서 레군저도 녀문고저 돼야 아니 가사 단지를 통해 아니 가사 단지에 아니 바에 탑이었다 말지 때는 아니 콜로 투바지 뭐 인자 아니 거저 라율라 치지로도 슈벨로 인바지 어때라 디 녀보 가사게 다음에 봐도 삼사 다음에 거에 여봐 남자 엔딜라테는 고된 타요 여바시 레온데 아니 거데 딜라테는 뭐 쳐해 준 것도 디슨 거야 동해 삼바 매버 콜링 여바정 연주로 매버 대외 셈죠 때문에라 동해라 서버 릭데스
So that's so yes, if we look into the common sort of like sense of biography of the Buddha, looking into the life of the Buddha, we see how he was born into this sense of a prince in a kingdom, and very much lead a very protected life until escaping one evening or several evenings to go out into the local town, where he then observes sickness for the very first time, we are told, and then later aging, the various sufferings related to aging, and then on a third occasion, death itself, a body being carried through the streets. And so this has a profound effect on the Buddha, and really kind of like is that which really sets up his life of an analysis of all of these conditions. How can we get beyond these conditions and so on? In other words, it was a sense of renunciation that set him going. Now, from the Mahayana point of view, of course, this is a demonstration of an already enlightened being who has come back in the emanation body to demonstrate this all for our benefit. So the Buddha is already enlightened, of course. From the common vehicle point of view, it is the being who becomes the Buddha in that life, and these are key moments in kind of like the activities of the Buddha, where he is inspired then to escape from the luxury of the palace, to cut his hair, to seek out teachers, to get beyond, and so on, and develop this sense of renunciation that really propels him to that point of enlightenment. And that the Buddha is then interested in this whole issue of suffering, to elucidate what is categorized as suffering, and to with the purpose of really eradicating that suffering. In the so this kind of like to gain this to gain this release from suffering. So it's kind of like basically down to those with intelligence who experience the inevitability of suffering in this cyclic existence, really search for the causes of it and how to overcome it. Whereas those without that simply are impacted by that suffering. They have no kind of counteracting forces, and so this only their reaction or their response to that suffering only makes it worse. And so this verse then is looking at this life. Is said in cyclic existence, suffering is not just inevitable, but it's the nature of this reality. And if we don't reflect on that suffering, then there can be no renunciation. So here it's this exhortation of the mind to say, look, you really have to develop a kind of reliance on suffering in order to really cultivate patience. That is the way to go. And so here, we have all of the conditions that the Buddha observed in any life that we may have. This life of, we can have this sickness, but rather than simply eradicate it, the Buddha outlined not just true suffering, but the true causes of suffering. So this is arisen from a negative karma, putting it into a context, and that and whether we are in this human existence, we're going to have to experience the suffering of death, of birth, old age, sickness, and death, just for starters. And if we are born as a celestial being in the desire realm, we have the terrible kind of signs of impending death, this terrible mental suffering that we go through. If you are as an asura, then you're overcome by jealousy and anger. If you're in the form and formless realms, you do not get beyond suffering. You may not have to deal with the suffering of change, a suffering of suffering, but you have pervasive suffering. And this means that your tenure in the form and formless realms is limited. by our karma, and after which you may well end up falling into the lower realms. So it's basically saying the whole round of cyclic existence is marked by, is in the nature of suffering. And so therefore, we have to develop this sense of renunciation, to really a renunciation that takes in all of cyclic existence, saying this is not good enough. We have to get out of here. And so there is no fulfillment, proper fulfillment to be had within the limits of cyclic existence. And so the Buddha has pointed this out in the four Arya truths, where he did outline, true suffering, not only there, but then the true causes, the sources of suffering, being karma and our mental afflictions, particularly that grasping at the existence of a self, and then the path, the path leading to the cessation of that suffering, meaning that we have to really develop this sense of really understanding that the root cause of cyclic existence is the grasping at the self, and that and developing that wisdom of selflessness to get beyond that. So this is where this kind of wisdom comes in. This is where suffering it can really be of benefit in this, that we reflecting on this begins the process of renunciation of that suffering.
어때? 아니 동에 될라 때네 아니 지금 동에 될라 때네 연중 개 연구도 아니 된데서 그 답아도 답제 개별 줄로 그래서 동에 딜 중할 때네 아니 지가서 마기 와다 마가 와전에 때 매바전에 동에 디 연구래 코아바로 동에 디 연구랬어. 안 되는 인자 동에 디 되고 문도나 동에 될 타다 안그 디주 아니 안다 저 가서 디주 다 레냐베 주 아니 자와데 단지 마리바 랑전제라 소바 디주 지금 안 디게 데 빵전에 딜라 마가와 마제 마가한 데발레 안디 되고 문도나 디 규제전에 자와네 빵와전 디 연구 말와 와다 간제 지금 된데게 탑시 여바 인사 아니 동에 딜라전에 코 폐종 되기도 와 폐주도가 되는 인사 동에 중할 때는 고저 마기 받잖아 why me steps 마이 받잖아 아니 동에 디 중할 때는 되고 문도나 디 단단히 대화는 동에도 못하는 연구래. 그 소소 방가 제와는 그 코아스 근데 가서다 동에 그랑 신임 바 인상 코아라 참 친절라 어느 소소 동에 방가 제와 있네요다. 뭐 맞더네다 지금 내가 동에 청아 중간에도 방안에 거치 매와 차게 지금练过 지금 매와 차게 지금练过 다 딜레 단다 가르기 약을 써고 다 되게 동에도 되고 동에도 자와 가르스는 다 파풀로 돌아 단지 말이보다 란체진이 그 제한구도 아니 딩워트베 토네 아니 디슈크촌다 다예 로아 단지 말이보다 이년보 담에 또 베셔라 거예 란체지가 년보 현진의 거미에 아니 딜라테네 어다 동에되게 다 숙촌도 충도 줘야 돼 아니 동에 자원이나 말용하지 다 디테는 용도고도 아 가서 당부 동에 딩워트도 동에 인바 시험도 아니 대인여보 삼다 해 정도도 그 연대 정도도 어디 숨고 요발다 근데 인바에서 그 다가랑라 되는 동에 도스는 컴플레인은 제는 마대 받잖아 동에 교가르자 제조고 됐어
So suffering is our lot here in cyclic existence. That from suffering we need to learn the lesson of renunciation. And so this is the kind of bottom line as a means to then aim for liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment. It's kind of like it's no point in kind of wallowing in misery because of the suffering, or disliking our suffering, and then in that way feeding that unhappiness when suffering arises. Because as long as we're in cyclic existence, this is the way it is. Because cyclic existence is in the nature of suffering. And so what we have to do is to really seek out the causes of liberation, and that to understand that the the causes that are keeping me in cyclic existence are the negative karmas that I have accumulated, particularly ignorance of self-grasping. And so this is important that, you know, we are able to focus on that rather than kind of being overwhelmed by the suffering that arises. In other words, that we should really kind of like nourish our mind with the notion that there is a means here, there is a method, there is something we can do about all this suffering, and that is to create the causes for liberation, to isolate the causes of suffering and to eradicate them. And that this is regarded as the benefits of suffering, that it prompts us, it really pushes us to examine our lives. And what we're saying here is that the focus should be on that examination, should be to really nail down the main cause of suffering, and that rather than take the attitude of, you know, why me, why is it always me that has to go through this suffering? And so that only makes things worse. You know, that we better to say, look, cyclic existence is in the nature of suffering. And as long as I'm in cyclic existence, there's no getting beyond that, you know, and that we need to adopt a different approach to all of this suffering. And that this is, you know, I have to see that suffering has its causes. I need to isolate these causes to reduce suffering and ultimately to eradicate that. And the main causes of my suffering are the self-grasping attitude and the self-cherishing attitude. And I know that there is an antidote to the self-grasping attitude in the form of the wisdom of selflessness. And there's an antidote to the self-cherishing attitude in the form of the attitude which cherishes others. And so this is the alternative to our complaining mind, and that here to really put that aside and to concentrate on the causes of suffering in order to cultivate the antidotes to those causes.
他感觉就告诉的这个中文的上层的这部中文的了，这部的了马高的那他没给我真他的超有马说的了，他说哦，他中文的说那这部的用个话三三节我这呢，用个话是当做练，他其中的没用完了，他就没这话解决，可是呢，可是呢，中文的上三说呢，那这部了让我们多，他让我们过就是举个了多。yu kabla tuwa, ta yu ti, ane takta chigi, dunga yu ma yinba chi tuwa yina, ane ko dunga yunga shosana yung tuku yo ma re. Ta yu ti, dunga yu lu ngondo sonsana, ta dewa yunga shosala wane dewa yung tuku yo ma re. Ko dewa chungda ma chung sida, ko molong jama jang kita re mo tuwa, dewa chungda ma chung sida, yu ngondo son ma son re tuwa. Digi yu chung ngondo sona, ane ko debu digi de rangwa me digi, dunga yu chung ngondo sona, 제부 동행의 라완 매대겠지. 라완 매겐지 레도와. 다대에서 동행의 동행의 중차도 어디 가면 좀 미게 와지 친여래스. 안 들라들 동행의 용거로 쓰는 배 켈레샤이다. 뭐게 맞아. 다디와서 다 가르치고도서는 왔다. 동행 좀 미게 와지 좀 도스. 되게 대화에서 되게 개와 죽고 도스. 왔다 가자 가서 뭐이데 내줘도 tum바토네. So
you know, when we experience suffering, we're talking about the result of something ripening. And so at that point, it's pointless to be irritated or complaining or unaccepting of that at that point, as the result has already ripened. But we have to understand that that result, like every other result, has a cause that precedes it. And so we have to focus on the causal point to thereafter not experience a resultant suffering. So it's kind of like therefore, it's much more wise to accept the suffering that is arising for ourselves, and then to really focus on eradicating the causes in future. And so, this is not something that is an invention, that the law of cause and effect is a natural law. If the causes are there, then the result will ripen. This is a natural following on of results from cause. And conversely speaking, if we do not create the cause, eradicate the cause, then there's no possibility of a result arising. So even if we were to beg for suffering to arise, if we have not created the cause, then there's no suffering result possible. And likewise, if we're praying for happiness, but we haven't created the causes for that, and then there is no possibility of happiness ripening into a result. And so it's kind of like these are not self-powered entities we were talking about. This is a natural law. So therefore, the common sense conclusion is to focus on the cause, at that point of the relationship, focus on the cause to make sure that on the one hand, there aren't any causes for a suffering result, and there are lots of causes for a happy result. And this is the actuality of the situation.
Geshe Danyi Chenpo Soge, and the Ningdop Gene, Pembatane, and a Semja Tam Jang Yasong Dungeleta, Quad and Yasong Dungeletane, and a Geshe Danyi Chenpo Kori, and a Keba the Keba about the Semjang Dunge to get the Kwanala Minchen, and a Keba about the Yasola Mi. There is never shows Moja, Pembatan, Nangidua. Nangidu there, Yinaya, Ko Yasong good the member in San, and told it that Taba the Sanje Gulo Drotitua. Nyanso jude ko mige jubung chudim la sobata tagane shige semjela nese seba ane ran chenzen ta an danzi mari bala tende ong yong yo ba za khona do di la nyembo tene jene ane semjenga phemba tube chodo ta semjela phen thoba yina thoe gari imba ne dang nge chigi ane semje 탐제게 ane nyanso go dunga le nyaba gari ba de 탐제 be 뒤지도 ngala baba sho nge chene nga nyanso la degi semje de da 탐제 ane taba 탐제 gembe goma thoba sho ba pheba be 가서다 지금 가서다 찾아서 말해 봐 샘딩네 신셀리레다 코로나 거 열때 얘네야 냥송을 끼고 요 말이 딜러 때는 타바다 탐지 김에 고마 첩도고도 탐지 김에 고마를 줘되기도 탐지 김에 귤을 줘되기도 가르스나 냥송 유디 말와 뒤차버와
And so when we look into the behavior of the great bodhisattvas, the tremendous courage that they demonstrate in their practice, and for eons of time, whereby they kind of really pray that all the suffering of all sentient beings ripen upon them right there and then, that they were willing to endure the privations and sufferings of the lower realms if it were to benefit sentient beings. Now, do they endure all the suffering of all sentient beings because of that? Do they enter into the lower realms because of their prayer? No, they haven't created the cause for that. But of course, what they are doing is creating the causes for liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment. And so this is focusing on the causal part of it. And so they're kind of like cultivating powerful antidotes to self-cherishing and the self-grasping mind. And that these prayers for may all the sufferings of all the sentient beings ripen upon me now, may I be reborn in the lower realms to benefit sentient beings for eons of time, etc., etc. Now it's kind of like these people are not just paying lip service, to these idealistic thoughts or just doing so to look good. They are completely sincere in their prayers. Completely, this is coming from deep down, where they really have this really powerful sensitivity to all the sufferings of all sentient beings, wanting really wanting that to happen, that they could experience it for them, that they could experience all of the sufferings of the lower realms for other sentient beings. But of course, they're not creating the causes for that, so they don't. But their courage, their really sincere aspirations are creating powerful causes for liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment.
다 디게데 동에 당랭게 소발라 때는 연구도 셈제 생게 동에라 미수바티 아니 동에 랑게 땅돌레네 다 용되게 도와 들라 때는 가서데 진짜 동에 대 강에 여바데 캥게 여다 셈제 생게 동에 나오도 미수바 닝지께네 아니 동에다 랑게 땅돌레네 동에다 나라 미쇼 녜키게 있어 그러 녜키게 있어 와다 동에 당랭게 소바델라 때는 소발라테네 아니 덴데기 가서도 다가자 닝덥게 닝덥들라테네 탐지 개베 유튜브도 도.
So this very notion.
동네 공배 연대래도.
So this is really sincerely people saying really I really accept all of that suffering of all sentient beings voluntarily. It's kind of, I find it unbearable that others should have to go through such terrible suffering. Please allow it to ripen on me. I can take it. I will voluntarily accept for it to ripen upon me now. I'll carry you. I'll carry that suffering for you. And so it's kind of this sense of really massive courage that, of course, is not guaranteeing that they will suffer. Others suffering, but that they are laying down powerful causes for liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment. And so this is again demonstrating when we habituate to suffering, there are tremendous benefits to be had.
어디서 다가 이제 동네게 거기서 지금 삼로 당지나 배유 봐도 매번 유연되겠지 용되기도 다들 근데 용에대 다다데 그와 다다데서 원주에 가도 똑같죠 한번 오말을 대바다 대바 까나데 어저 루기 차체 다 루기 차체 그래서 차체 나 루기 세부 색바다 제바 다가 이제 리지게 다가 지금 가서라 다 된데게 가서라 랑게 르라 아니 지게 이공 부여라 소바 아니 색바 제발 다들 까투빈스 거라 하나도 냠내인스 까투빈스 다 지게 디바다야다 된데체도 인스 아니 된데 야 리지게 되는만 다 노통이 그래 자가나도 가시다 대자존 때때는 아니 수보가 대자쇼 근데 여 인디전 대자쇼 소소소불 밀자다 된데게 동네 땅도 내는 다 인교다 소소게 지 가서라 냠내인 베게자로 와 다 들어와 다 된대게 안에 동에 된대 안에 문에 전에다 지금 가서는 다 그런저 지금 삼로 땅다 지금 레모도 문에 전에 돈다 매트 소리 잡으러 왔다 돈다 매트 저 된대게 되면 된대로 수고도 와서 와 되면 봐야 수바 지금 제발이나 다 단단 알아서 동에 중화티 디라 안에 동에 디 안에 동에 유제 전에 안에 유방에 탑치 정어도 왔다도 그걸 라붙인 거 연구도 와 안 딜라다 랑동에 졸라 셴딩을 졸라 니지게 두고도 좋아 니지게 두고도 아니 딜라데네 셴동을 미세베 니지게네 아니 셴동에게 아니 다 셴게 동에데 아니 소소게 다 배도 땅돌레네 그게 제발 로지 이런 게 로이 삼사게 키기 삼사 어디게 동에디 다 강에 요래 강에 있다 셈제 셴라 강에 있다 셴진제 그거 쓰고요 맞다 쓰고면 땅 말로 땅에 개바면 도세 그와 개바면도 저 개들 탑시 위험하나 배 자제 자당바 다 줘봤잖아 개들 탑시 위험하는 자당바 다 줘봤잖아 와다 근데 제에게 딱 간제 닝도다 되도 건가 데데 그 동에 들을 때네 동에 달린 게 서바 들을 때는 용되기도 와 용되기도 와 와다 근데 이제 근데 랍쳐보 근데 용도 가서 서바잖아 아니 돈 전부 타바다 탐제 캠에 고마토베 돈도 동에 요와다 다 거치치 가서 다고 지치 다데 소바에서 딱 가르치네 다 마소바 제고래 소바 제고를 왔어 제좀 제도 갔어 처음에 교된데를 소바 제기도 왔어 동에 처음에 교된데를 어느 소바 제기도 왔어 다 된데 소바 제기 여바 이나 아니 된데 타바다 탐제 캠에게 아니 동에 다들 대화 주변에 된데그 갈지를 쓰고 말을 써봐 제거로 써봐 리소시아봐 오점 저 변에 다른 거저 대화래 다들 계제 시간에 지금 미미시다 변에 타투다 된데서는 갈수 자기도 레모 수불 레모티네 나자를 싫어 열어 는 도성에 쳐보 열어 봐 얘네 된데 동에도 쓰고 지기도 와 쓰고도 왔다 쓰고도 와다 가셔 수부 차상을 속은데도 와 얘네 다 지다 소수도 대발데 얘네 된데 동에 동강에 열에 조선 열에 대 얘네들의 수고도 와 다들 거네 다 단단 알아서 지금 남주 소속에 동에 되게 딱 되게 아니 동에 뒤 가서는 들어 마기봐 쟤는 마가 소라 딱 가서 동에 뒤딱 가서래 뒤 아니 지금 가서래 이게 들어 아니 마기봐 마가 대발래 동에 뒤 당도나 어디 레녀바 사바 중앙에 연구를 와 선서제 가 코아바라 동에 연구를 왔어 그 땅에 동네에 매버서 가서 죽어질 세전 매버서 답제다 그뒤 동네에 타바다 탐색팀에 줄을 배주 땅 두바 지어 있나 아니 거다 탑켜버려 와 동네들 막아버전 대발에 동네에 타바다 탐색팀에 유튜브 두바 지어
So then there's this comparison between those who are followers of Shiva going through various austerities and hardships. There are devotees of Durga who kind of pierce their bodies with sharp metal kind of skewers and burned the body, etc., and cut the flesh. All as kind of means of kind of mortification of the flesh for the purpose of purification of negativity. And so this is their way of doing it. This is their purpose. This is regarded as quite pointless, really. But they, you see how they really bear these kinds of tortures, of self-inflicted tortures. And you will often see them with the cheeks pierced. With various metal rods and so on, and then a kind of a cat and nine tails where they're beating themselves on the back to draw blood as they are in procession and so on. And so this is a very, very open demonstration of their devotion, and they're taking on this kind of hardship to purify negativities, but seeing it as quite pointless. Quite another thing, if they had a really profound motivation, perhaps, to take on the sufferings of all sentient beings. But the comparison really is here saying that this is quite pointless. But for a great purpose like the attainment of liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment, why are we not willing to put up with suffering to be able to attain such great goals? And so therefore saying, patience is absolutely right to cultivate for that purpose. And so it's kind of like really, we really, again, have to always concentrate on that cause. That suffering is a profound inspiration if looked on as a cause to show how we can purify, therefore, negativities, how we can cultivate compassion based on our own experience, and that it can be something which is really 100% beneficial in that way, that we develop that courage, that focus, and that in a way too, we have this sort of how do you say, ongoing care of the body that can be quite trying. The way we have to keep it clean, keep it from not smelling badly, and we make sure that it's dressed in correct way and so on.
This is better. Tattoo. Sukula remote guda. Remo, sukula remote it. Sukula. Sukula remote guda. Remo. Tattoo, sira kale. Tattoo. What's called? Tattoo.
Oh, tattoos.
Oh,
Tattoo.
나자 심지어 생각도 돼.
Oh, so again, I'm saying, yeah, we
한테 공항에 전부 되고 또 왔다. 네 동네도 쓰고도 와야.
right. So again, I'm saying, yeah. So we, where it's kind of almost de rigueur these days to have a tattoo, and it's kind of well known. It's a very painful process to actually get a tattoo. Not to mention how expensive it can be to get a tattoo. Yet this is something we're willing to bear for whatever reason, and that so if we're kind of like have that capacity to bear pointless suffering like that, then why not bear the suffering of cyclic existence for the sake of developing the causes for liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment? This is what makes far more sense.
어들 딱 앉아 저 가서래 동네 남중 가라 속에 다저 가서 코아버래 동네 용한 되었더라 지 가서래 소소 마기 바자 마가 와자 마서 와자네 된데 많이 바자 다이네 지다 동네 연구 도나 먼저 동네 미디어 바래 그 동네 매버서 탑시다 지구로 와그 교사에네 게마잖아 동네 연구 말해 안디자 그 게다 마트바 지구래 삽사 지구래 이네 다 교제 용수 잡아서 사도 알고 마가 와자네 마대 바자네 아니 데 동네데 당도라는 오다 동네 디 연구를 왔어. 그래서 과바를 왔어. 소소소게 아니 동네 가서 동네 디 영화 여봐도 뭐래잖아. 다 동네데 되고 문도나 가르쳐서 동네데 큐드 좀 문도 서는 거트 디 미게월에 중화래 서는 거트. 오다 교육원에 방답제 좀 동네 코라라 막 지금 마기 봐제 아니 주고 건가로 어디 디 온게 줘서 디 출로 건가로 주고 아니 딜라 때문에 종서 때 강가를 동네 태바소에 유튜브 대 주도가 다티 지지어 말씀 거 봐.
So therefore, the suffering that is inevitable, we have to find a better way of dealing with it, and that it's not meant to be the case that we are kind of like powerless in the face of suffering, and we just have to grin and bear it. Of course, when you're suffering, there's a way of dealing with it, with a level-headed mind, but also you are entitled to seek a remedy for that suffering. And so it's kind of like, oh, all right, you've created the causes, and this is the inevitable result, but there are cooperative conditions that combine with the cause that then ripens it into a result. Now you can operate on the cooperative conditions and seek to ameliorate the suffering in that way, and that's perfectly fine. And so it's the way of kind of really being able to deal skillfully with the suffering that you are experiencing. And of course, if we don't want suffering at all, then we have to make sure that we are not creating the causes, and that we are purifying the causes that have been created. So it's kind of like it's really not smart nor beneficial to constantly point to some kind of external cause to our suffering and kind of enter the blame game. This is not skillful nor beneficial.
다다 가서 조어도 다다 삼루고 땅당 사이콜로지 토르게 셰고라 삼루 땅당 거 토르다 동안 좋은 사바이나 동안에 땅도 란잖아 강에 요마를 숨고요 다 된다 되래 얘네 다 거라 탑시도 거 동안 매버자 탑시도는 가리네 지구로 와그 매사를 매버자고 옛날에 가르치고 있네 어디 탑시도 제 얘네 삼루고 토네 땅도 란잖아 어로와 거서 다다 강에 가 삼루고 토네 강에 제되고 요와
And so it's really kind of good psychology, that suffering will arise. Therefore, learn how to really accept that suffering. And if you do what you can in order to ameliorate or to ease or to eradicate that suffering, such as if you're sick, take medicine and seek out the right medicine, etc. But it's kind of going, this is the common sense approach, to really reflect on the suffering that is there, that it is being experienced, to accept it as best you can, and then to seek a way of easing it and eradicating it.
hotel there's a 동해 중에서 삼로가 돈에 아니 마기바 뭐야 전에 아니 동해 지와들 연대 여바 하고 해서 딜레들 아니 년중께 두고도 딜레들 샬라 닝지께 두고도 오다 되게 뭐 줘봤잖아 아니 동해 지와가 되게 배치 다시 뭐 거래 수고요 다 달로.
And so one beginning approach is that, when suffering is there and we're reflecting on it, we reflect on the one hand, not to be, how do you say, upset by that suffering or unhappy by this suffering, and but rather to think about the benefits of this actual right now feeling of suffering, in that it allows me to cultivate compassion for others who may be going through this, etc., and see the benefits of that suffering.
근데 삼로당 돈에 야부요래. 그래서 동해 중원도 아니 동해대 유대나 마주바데 삼로당네. 동해대 유대나 마주바데 아니 교계 망보 때는 중원에서 유대나 주와 말이 유대나 주와 유자요 말이스. 안데 유대나 주와 매바 녜네 동반이 쳐라 삼로당. 그래서는 유대나 주와 있나 그 교계 망보라 때는 연구 버려. 그 유대나 주와는 그 뒤에 동해 뒤에마다 동해의 참상민도 근데 그 유대는 좋아하면 다도 그래서 그 경기 대바점 그 교대 깨라 때는 그초 규정 초원도 유대가 규정 맞아도 매 되겠지 근데 그 유대는 못 줘버려 삼다 아니 유대는 못 줘봐 디 아니 디 동바 삼로다나 동바 디 아니 동바 예바 디 로디 대화대 대외 동바대 대도문이 숨에 이식께서 삼사 삼다 대례 삼로당 대화 중에 다가는 대화대 유대는 주바 말해 그 교견 태원들 중말에 대례서 유대는 좀 뒤사야 말이야 동바서 동바대야 매바 이제 그 전에 대화대 대화 예배로대 동바대 대도니 숨에 이식께서 삼사 오다 동네 중간에 동바대 대화 중간에 동바대는 동니가 고아들라 삼로지 땅네 제도는 야보요래.
So one excellent technique when suffering arises is to go into a meditation on emptiness itself, to understand how this suffering is in no way objectively existent, and it is empty of existing independently or objectively, and to kind of really see how it has to arise in dependence upon its causes and conditions. That's why the suffering is sometimes there, sometimes not, and that it can only arise when the causes and conditions come together and then produce this result. So it's a completely dependent entity. So there's a very, very good way of reflecting on that. And you can, again, go into the wisdom combining with voidness and engage into the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness meditation. And similarly, so when happiness arises, again, to understand that this is a completely lacking in any objective existence. And, it arises again in dependence upon causes and conditions coming together in a particular way to produce this particular result. And it has in no way has any sense of objective existence. And again, the wisdom combining with voidness, the wisdom of the bliss of combining with voidness, and the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness can be evoked.
단단한 가르쳐 대돈이스 이시게 내체의 레요 말에 매바 이체가 저 삼로단 매바 이체가 저게 바 삼로단데 어디 네 공발을 때네 아니 림베게 아니 지산 줘 동반이를 예바 숙체도 줘야 그러와 어다 되네 예바 숙체도 줘도 동에 되게 막기와 매바 차도야지 어디 아니 동에 딜을 때네 동반이가 삼로스 땅 도와치네 다 딜레제도 에고 찍을 주고 사람도 동해제도 동해 그 녀밖에는 종수 써야 말고 랑게 레사 레사 레딜라테는 아니 치료 게망고 제체온도 아니 뒤다 내당다 망고지를 태도 아니 그 동해의 용대지 거로 그 랑원의 주가 많이지 그 유대네 Rawan and Juba, do some medical. Gugem Woods, Tony Yon Dewachito, Dunga Diligent, Ya, Dombanica Tawa telling you about you to hear. Did Dombanica Tawa telling you about you, but some of my mass sub the Matan on the look, can't shout to do you didn't do some of the Kachak, something called Sem Shani. Sem Shawa dealer tene, and because of the Mova Yishi go to Dewa, they don't get so some such. Dewa didn't give a lot ye, and Kajak Tombanigas, Lord Tombanig, you tickle something shaso, some such. Yeah, and did Dewa, what did they such an and then they get Dunga Chungatilla, Magiva Yunju Sabla, Dunga Chungatilla, the Tombate, Dewate, Chitu, yeah. Lusamla, Swami Jawa gay eating it. And the dilatine and Jikaso Namdo Shamba Machari. Mogoege and the Jikaso the Nomu Mondo Maju Kaba Yontage. What did the Yontage? That was a bezo, that the bezo majo tamer. Did Java Yena and Rimbege and call Sange Garichua in Tombani 10 to inch. That Digi Joina didn't see the Shubanishan. And there were the Korawan to Amari, Kuyamango, Sultan, Joan. And then let's on the town Joan to Korawan to what do some around to what a Tambuni or ticket Mudua, Kokalamo, which are young dog. What I did around to what two summons what any Rawan to Madu and never shook Chesani. And a did and a Kasha cousin de la same shop. Tea there what. And the one you were lotty, Tata Tomani Dogmarte, the one you were lotty, Tomani yes or some such. Maybe you just do it. What in the summer chick, Dani, down soon, and you can reach a chair in there. You sang a can reach a chair in what summer Talashatuna, and it was a Tomani go out or Shavati, Tetam Chama Shavajanti, you can reach a chair, Lola can reach our Dicala Tomani Pine, Johnny, and then Rangi. Same dig now a chatan kangala, Tombani get up to watch. Jumayina Ota, Rang Tombani go out or Shabbat Pendo Yogurwa.
So what we're describing here is at the level of kind of an aspirational conviction, really. It's not for real, of course. But what is very, very useful is to really try to employ this way of thinking on as many occasions as one can, to gain that familiarity with the whole doctrine of emptiness, and to kind of gain a kind of more and more subtle and understanding of emptiness is kind of very key here. And so what we're doing is kind of like, saying, entering into this line of thought, the bliss combining with voidness, etc., the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness, and to cut off all routes to being made unhappy because of the suffering that is kind of playing out in one's mind. And that here one is able to focus on the karma that has been accumulated, the kind of external conditions that have combined with cause to bring forth this sense of suffering, but that that it has no sense of kind of solidity or objective existence of really existing from its own side. It's only kind of there. It's only powered by the fact of these cause and cooperating conditions coming together to bring it about. And there are many and varied conditions that the fact of the essence of what's going on is empty. It's an emptiness, and that to really gain conviction in that view of it. So it's kind of like really look into it and really gain that point of an analysis of what's going on, to get to the mere negation of the object of negation, and then to try to use placement meditation to focus on just that. And similarly, if that bliss arises, we also give that the same treatment, that it is to kind of gain that point of the mere negation of the object of negation again, and use placement meditation to focus on that. And so it's kind of like that the the benefits here, of course, is that we have an excellent antidote to the instant of suffering arising. We're able to put that into a context whereby it doesn't depend upon our sense of well-being. And likewise, we are familiarizing with the most powerful antidote to mental affliction. So we can, this is not going to become, our go-to, as it were, antidote straight away. We have to really work at familiarizing this response in all of these untoward situations, and that it's a stage by stage development. It's a gradual development whereby you are reminded of emptiness in every instance of whatever it is, suffering, happiness, and so on. You're able to immediately put it into that kind of realm of something that does not exist objectively. It's merely imputed by thought, and that the emptiness of the situation becomes this more significant thought pattern for you, and that requires a tremendous amount of effort, of course, to put into that, and that kind of like too that that emptiness itself of the situation, of the suffering, the bliss that may be experienced thereafter, all lack any objective existence and merely imputed by thought. And that's kind of like situation becomes a good situation. The object of our focus becomes a good object of focus. And that because it is enhancing, deepening our understanding of emptiness, and that the understanding that this is something simply arising in one's mind, again, due to causes and conditions. It is ephemeral, and it is lacking any solid objective existence, and merely imputed.
마자난 다와 자이나 아니 소소 저보다 워심바도 수도바도 딜레테네 소소 지그 소소 섬다녀보 가고 여사제 두온데 기부도와 디 기부디 야 유대나 마두와 삼다 디 동바데 동베데 데도니스바 야 소소 마가사지 두오네 스마기보라메도와 메바디 야 유대나 마두바제 삼다 유대나 마두바디 삼다 데가 자카자 디 동바데 동베데 데도니스바 이시 삼다 그래서 아코디가다 지금 상해니가라 녀모게의 숙청의 조에 아니 동반이라 녀바 숙체의 장투에 마음벌 대도니스메베 이시게가 바자 개바제 샤야 아니 캡사 전부도 와 모두 미즈나 용대로 칼라산의 섬전 기부여래 섬전야 칼라사와들 강해태 연구를 다 저거 당 워시버토는 섬전 기부여래 섬전야 소소 막아서 도도 마기바여래 다 되게 건가 지가서 뒤 동바대 동배 대화를 대도니스면 이실에 강가를 자야요. 그래서 거의 뭐 유대는 마주바 이마 인상 그 강가를 자세요. 좋아. 그 뭐 유대는 마주바데 코아다 그래서 냥대 코아다 냥대 니가를 자야요. 봐. 강가 유대는 마주바로 와. 시주는 유대는 마주베 잡으러 와. 좋아. 디 인상 그 상해 강가를 자요. 다 디치도 네가 동바텐토에 귤을 배주 땅토나 아니 삼로 셔바 로바티가 되게 두고 말해 아니 딜라테는 동발에 예바 숙체다 하지 땅토나 거기 겹상 두가 그제 매바 말도 안 나가서 삼로 땅 마당지로 와 삼로 땅 뭐이나 땅서 두가 그러니까 생각하서 동반이 고아 또 신경 열어 와 고아 또 셔바 강가를 배주 자투 봐이나
So this kind of thinking, of course, is applicable in whatever we do when we're eating or drinking tea, or we're meeting with close friends, and the happiness that can arise from that, or even meeting with somebody we dislike and the unhappiness that arises from that. That whatever occurs, good, bad, or different, we apply the reality of the situation is that it is lacking any objective existence. It's merely an imputation. The bliss combining with voidness and the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness can be applied in every and any situation. And so kind of it's really incredibly beneficial, because one is that we really reduce completely eradicate the possibility of mental affliction in that moment, but also reducing the familiarity of mental affliction in our minds. It's something that enhances our experience of an understanding of emptiness. It's something that lays down incredibly powerful positive imprints on the mind. And so we can apply this thought pattern of bliss combining with voidness, and the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness in all of these situations, because as it said, all of within, whether cyclic existence or nirvana, is empty of any objective inherent existence. And so it's kind of like really, it's once one is able to apply this way of thinking, then other thoughts are shut out. And so we are on a very positive, powerful imprint kind of way of thinking. And so to understand also that our reality is created by our own thinking. So therefore, it behoves us to think in the most beneficial way we can. And this is definitely one wonderful way of doing it.
我这他看见这我做这个告诉了这个老中老忙不接不的，那这个这个对接，那能把现在决定不接不的，他看着当我做东西家伙了，哦，他可能是别去当过的事，他东西家伙都，那个他天天是搞东家做了，他看见这个东西家伙，他看见这我说，讲究个什么嘛，就他们都，东西都被下来的嘛，就他们都，他这个刚刚。 그 구급 중세 건가를 아는 구급 심토와 제다. 그렇죠? 구급 24 hours 7 day 구급 요르다. 장주 셈비 계산 구급 요래. 돈이 또 배셔라 계산 구급 건가 요래. 이네 다 이와지네 오더처럼 다 계란디 구급을 해서 용하여만 다 구급 소수 소고도. 그렇죠? 소수 소네. 아니 학동도 단다 미 류된 제대로 가다 미리대 때 어제 기름 먹어서 내면 하고 뭐 치원에 남친이면 치워서 치워만도 마도 배워 근데 마시바 이네 뒤 받으라다 제가 냐면 망고도 그 미진이 되게 여대 이네 소소 파마 보고 뭐 마신 되기도 그렇지 좋아 내가 알아들라 차에 매번 말이와 좋아 알아서 가는데 저기 말에 계란 차고 말했어요 말은 어저야 직전에 드린 오스트라산이 소소 남이 뭐 마셔봐 차기 요로 가라 하고 시야 마셔봐라 와 미셔봐라 차기는 어디로 차기 매세요 말해 차기 매세요 말해 그 마시뱅게래 그 루부 미인바이네 삼로 미그 삼로 차당 땅 마도베 뒤주 용해도 와 다디 다 단다 땅 뒤에 뒤주 때라 다 거기는 그거 이제 심바이나 다데 24 hours 7 day 가바이네 랑경원에 생기고는 강가 차진 요다 장주고 셈게당 장주고 생고 냠내 제당 연종게 장주고 셈게 동리도배 셔럽게 강가 요다데 다이네다 곧다 주고라 곧다 단단해 지금 유태세 건가라 동리도배 게담네 삼마당도에 아니 셈제 로라 차제다 통제 건가라 잠바데 닝제 게투에 아니 코에게 내당 거제 님바라 딜 녀버죠 연종 게투에 단단해 배주 땅 마도나 왔다 뒤주 용은 어디 삼로당에 뒤주를 다서 용해 싸워니네 메다 단다게 뒤주 다가라래 되면도 심하지 매되겠지 등원저 가서 뒤견도 dem받아 시시가 승부고도
So when should we begin? When should we apply this kind of thinking? The answer is now, straight away. That we have certain appreciation of mind training. We see ourselves as Buddhists, and so it's kind of like really we have to ask the question: how are we using the information that we are assimilating? How are we putting that, integrating that into our lives? And how are we doing that 24/7? It's kind of like really, really important. Are we enhancing our appreciation of and cultivation of the mind of enlightenment? Are we deepening our understanding of emptiness? That in everything that we do, And that's kind of like really, to see how there are opportunities, bountiful opportunities for us 24/7, but are we seizing these opportunities? Are we really using the information that we know we have to really deal more skillfully with life? And that's here, it's kind of like, it's, again, it's our own thinking that's it's really so important here. And it's kind of like not something that we can order from elsewhere. We are the authors of our own reality. And so this is how we should view it, that we have the capacity to be able to have the thoughts of the mind of enlightenment, the thoughts of emptiness, the thoughts of renunciation, etc., of kindness, of compassion, and so on, and to the fore in our thinking at all times, regardless of what our external reality is. And so this is something we have to do for ourselves. We have a human existence. We have a precious human rebirth. There is nothing else that is necessary. We're not waiting for the ideal conditions. The ideal conditions are here and now, and that also, we can't guarantee how long we will have these conditions, how long we'll be able to even apply such thinking in the life that we have already. There will be a time when we lose that capacity, when we may still have a human body, but not think like a human being. And so it's kind of really important to see that there is no benefit to procrastination here. There's no reason to delay. We have to see that this is the time that we have to put everything into place right now. There's nothing that we need to wait for. Again, this is the work of 24/7, all the time. And we are living with our own minds. We have our own thoughts. We are the ones at the steering wheel. And so we have to ensure that we are driving our mind to appreciate more and more the mind of enlightenment, renunciation, emptiness, loving kindness, compassion, and so on, to really see all sentient beings in that light, that they are the ones who are helping us to cultivate love, cultivate compassion, cultivate that sense of affection. And so when is the time that we should be using this? Right now, start now. How much time should we be using to look for opportunities to do this? 24/7.
어디가 샘고 양보자 바페보자 아니 구급 심투바체 그와 돈이가 삼로다야 구급 년중계 구급 자주가 샘고 계획고 구급 차장 심투바체네 그와 고티네 구급도 예버래 구급 차대고 요다 말아서 구급도 심마도 하잖아 쇼트고도 아니 구급도 녀mol라 때 샤샤고도 아니 코에 줄을 치면도 타바다 탐지 치면 줄을 도둑문도 와 다티 구급도 말아서 잼바다 시신 배주 당전은 어느 송투바체네 오다 송투바체의 개침버도 되면도 되게 쉬워는 시대 아니 그래서 알리 지금 치원이 남진님의 치외도 최만도 마면서 오다 다가라 레데이네 마치베 녀레 그 미류제 아니 잼바 냠제는 소속의 지금 가서도 초가다 깨면다 파마다 부고 뭐마 심바들 용되기도 대야 규를 뭐 대야들 용되기도 이는 류미 제버다 이는 다 된데 내다 레서는 뭐 간체 두고 말와 간체 두고 말와 두고 말와 다 두고야 단다 삼로 또 땅투와 디칸 레도 그래서 최근에 삼류 때문에 두고 하지도 아니 국업도 삼류 때문에 국업 심고 하지도
So it's really about, keeping the mind relaxed and open, and to being able to take the opportunities that are presented to us. So the opportunities are there. Much of the time, our downfall is that we are not taking the opportunities. We're not seizing the opportunities to be of benefit. And so it's very, very important that we have our mindfulness and alertness playing an important part here, that keep us kind of primed for opportunities. And then our motivation is to really seize those opportunities. Also very helpful in a situation like this is to contemplate on death, how death is definite, the time of death being indefinite, and that only our Dharma practice will be a benefit to us at that time of death. And so it's kind of really, really important. Do not delay, do not leave it to the point where, you have situations where, parents no longer even recognize who their children are. They've lost that control of the mind. And so they can't do, at that point, you can't do anything, and we don't know when that sort of mental kind of deterioration is going to creep up on us. So now is kind of, we have control of our thinking. So therefore use it in the best possible way.
What Tinsa was a church to the Injimiji, Chicago, the Kandure Church, and Gomre Jab Dara members and Kawaii, Tony Samlo Tansado, Nianjong Samlo Tansado, and Jajuga Sem sounds Tansado. They got cook up Godune to what they call Sim to a chet, Sim to a chet.
So this is also emphasizing that, when we talk about practicing the Dharma, it's not simply confined to prayer and meditation. That when we're out and about, indeed, whatever we're doing, anytime, wherever, we have the opportunity to enhance our mind of enlightenment, our understanding of emptiness, renunciation, etc., and compassion, and so on. So we leave it for today. Kind of like that's the kind of time. I have an interview coming up now as well. So we leave it there for today.
Okay, yeah. Geshe de mozo niri nyamlen ka ze chagdo samlo kan le staw di gecha ingre te ana mozo kan to do jolen de chela de she de zedan dos ya gre teng do de che so jobu to ne ko so de shu je ke yo mare da gechi de mozo samlo kan le staw do nyamlen kan le chagu to an di tol jing kan to do mozo samlo sta na mare gechi de ingre.
So for me anyway, what's most important is not to rush through things, but rather to really continuously focus on how we should be practicing and how we should be thinking. Where do we place our thoughts? How do we start to really address the moment-to-moment possibilities in a Dharma world, in our Dharma life? This is most important.
Dagi shuvalation because of the Sange condition and Sana Dona Dena Kanga, the Tombanili Gesh Tapta, the Comshi Jada, Comshi Jana, and because of the social Tombani Guato, so what Diganapa, Janet Chimbayina, and got you in a Tombani Samro Hangi, you take it. And got the chick, Jenny Ganza to Comshi Jawan. And Pendo John take it.
So I really emphasize this. Technique of applying emptiness, the emptiness thinking to whatever arises, good or bad, in our life. This is, I think, a really, really powerful kind of a technique to really help us to deepen our understanding of emptiness, and that to make it into like our habit. Like our first thought will be, okay, place this in the context of it being lacking any objective existence, and so on. And that really, really helpful. I really would recommend that.
Right. Jobo to in the Sazan to go in the Pama Pugu to go in the and then so the Tibu Meva to the Kalaka, the Sagayana, Kawa to go in and Yalangiana, the Mategi and a man Yagi Takanja, condition Java in a Tombanigi Lacha and the Tombati and the water, they Tomba de Dedonism, she gets some such a what I give some summertime, maybe to give some water summertime, 10 by a tongue. And no, I check. What did it what did it?
So whether meeting with our friends and acquaintances, parents or children, or eating or drinking, or whether we're getting up in the morning or going to bed in the evening, whatever we're doing, whoever we're meeting, to be able to apply this thinking on emptiness again. This is something which is this whole experience is lacking any objective existence, merely imputed.
Shower in a Chapsan Tangi in a Kangal, Omdin Jayre, Kangal Jayre,
Yeah. So whatever you're doing in the shower and so on, that whatever you're doing, that this emptiness is leading to this bliss, voidness, and the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. Something that is really kind of not just and dedicating this at the end of each opportunity that you take as well, very, very powerful. So you are familiarizing with the whole doctrine of emptiness, you're laying down powerful inference, and you're laying down lots of virtue by dedicating.
What is that rang the lama shaja to was set up to the just set up just up and because that is one shin chen or what because the comes on car redo kawakewa in and that dungele madevaja dunga jue and chaba doji dungele madeva chat that then is or that tele and never tune and the never tune to dunga to tone tell misubajenta like never tune nianjong kombashe and then nianjong gave a lot di and rangi to pema damaki watch like you so some such and then that chinang sugar in and you didn't do us but do some medication. Right? You didn't do in by and go to you got the remote the is a coaching. The day by inside that caught you didn't do a minute that could do down the casa, then the Junga to some habit. Then is a what the day talk about patasam, right? Then the Junga, then what the combat shit. What the legend you didn't do what to some maybe the Kacha, the summer standard, then you have a lottie, and rang you, you make him when Yakon so that the day you may inside, that's some jet to Sanjay Kuma to where you take it. And I same gente. Simja Sanja Tobe you take a child. You didn't do any toy for your man. That in the Imbazapo, you then do what then you in by Zatan, Nianjong get Janjuga Semja, Yanta Tower get, and because of the Kasura, Takaja, Chizopaja Dula Soba, the Yamle, but that Jigja on do, or you to get Soba in Uncle Devo, Kota, Devo around me by Zani, Sanja Kumas, Devo Sanja Kuma top to you ticket. Today in order, Sanja Madonna, coming to Tobachi, they knew any the Tobachi, something need also some stuff. They did do but Rangichibo and the Caso, Davigin when Yakon shows, no Palazza, Lama, Tagichu, Pimita Kaja Kusu to Sudicha, Tambicas, Nibecos, Subet, Sanja Komamato, but the Chel so Sonakako.
So then we begin the dissolution process. The first contemplation is the contemplation on cyclic existence in the nature of suffering. Wherever one is reborn in any of the 6 realms of existence, one does not get beyond suffering. One has to endure the suffering, the suffering of change, and of course, the pervasive suffering. And so realizing this, it's a sense of finding that unbearable, wanting to gain a sense of definite emergence that leads to the development of renunciation, which is symbolized by the lotus disc mandala seat. And that then contemplating how all internal and external phenomena lack any objective existence. And one goes into that and really looks for such existence and not really finding it, arriving at the mere negation of the object of negation. And that again, from that contemplation of emptiness, it's symbolized by the sun mandala disc. And then looking into the aspiration we have to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, how it's so important that to be able to attain the actual state of Buddha is so important, and that we to do so, of course, we have to perfect the trainings in enunciation, in the mind of enlightenment, in the correct view of emptiness. Also perfect all the trainings of the 6 perfections as well, and to be able to establish all those causes will inevitably lead to that result. The result itself has no power not to manifest if we have accumulated the causes. So it gives us that understanding that Buddhahood is possible. Therefore, I reassert my determination. I must attain the state of enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings. And that mind of enlightenment is symbolized by the moon disk mandala seed. And then we utter the invocation verse, O glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moon seed placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first recitation, the figure moves from the space in front. At the end of the second, they have arrived at our pre-prepared seat. And at the end of the third, we have the certainty that the Guru Buddha will remain until we ourselves attain enlightenment.
rangi chibol pema tama kibe tendon dakata lama tuya bo shone ta sanje ko mo to che so ka ko ani dene yala to ba mende ta chwa pi chado so do ida mo me ran no was what did it o yala to ba mende ta chwa pi what did it.
And then, of course, we rejoice in that possibility, and we show our appreciation through the practices of the 7 limbs of practice, and of course, offering the mandala.
아니 되네 양종 연종 공부해 연종 공부하시는 데데게 아니 가서 연종 게 로티 아니 랑게 치고 랑게 닝가 빼마 닝데 빼마 다 되지라 주소 상사차 되네 지나는 조건의 유대도 요사 요마스 공부 양조지시 아니 되네 되네 그 가자 가삼 예배 로티 아니 되네 그 랑게 닝게 빼마 다 되지 되는 님의 경우 야고 주소서 되네 심제 탐제 산제 공부마도는 터버도 대한 요한이도 마도는 지금도 선 요한이도 토바지기 상사게 되네 로지게 아니 되네 그 둠바데 다외 경우 야고 전에 반대서 라마를 다게 닝가 그래 구수도 주고 손대 제와라 때는 라메 토바 뭐 근데 왜 이게 나바지 지원은 뭐 저는 하나게 닝게 요소 다 닝게 배마다 요소 쇼소 삼사 때 쇼소 삼사체 담보가 쇼 니가 담보가 배 니가 쇼 스모 때 산제 고마도 쳐서 다시 야부 중소 삼사잖아 고바시 때는 닝데 배마다 제대 남진닝네다 대가 도지가 생각 하게 뒤에 타고도 어느 때에 청아 다에도 없는면서 다에도 없는면서 다에도 없는면 마음을서 때에 청아 뭐 숨이 고되게 되네 지도 자매한 거 송아 어느 때는 오마라 바자나 디디디디디디 오마라 바자나 디디디 오마라 바자나 디디 뭐 숨이 고되게 되네 된데가 송아 그러나 오마 예다만 해도는 많이 샤만하게 쏘아서 어디 이게 좀 숨이 고되게 된데 좀 고바시.
And so then we start to focus on our own heart center in the preparation of a suitable seat to invite the Guru Buddha down. Again, reflecting on renunciation of all of psychic existence being in the nature of suffering and needing to gain definite emergence to get any hope of gaining, going beyond this suffering. This is symbolized by the lotus and mandala seed again. And then looking into inner and outer phenomena, lacking any inherent or objective existence, they're being merely imputed by thought, giving rise to the sun disk, which is symbolic of emptiness, wisdom of emptiness. And then, of course, the desire to quickly attain that state of enlightenment for that benefit all sentient beings, being represented by the moon disk, representing the mind of enlightenment Bodhisattva. Again, the recitation of our invocation verse, so glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moon seed placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainment of body, speech, and mind. Again, at the end of the first recitation, the figure moves into our central channel from the crown chakra. And then after this, at the second recitation, they move down through the central channel and arrive at our pre-prepared seat. And at the end of the third, we have again that certainty that the Guru Buddha will remain with us until we attain the state of enlightenment. And this is good. We rejoice in this fact. And then the petals of the lotus fold over and are sealed at their tips by a white pronged badge. And the package is surrounded by 3 mantras. The first is the name mantra of Shantideva Buddha in a clockwise direction. And the second is the mantra of Manjushri, in an anti-clockwise direction, and the third is the mantra of dependent origination, again in a clockwise direction.
What is Ranga news Lama to be on what tea and Kosung to the Veset Ranga Chiwan, Kandiga Palo, Lutam Vesegi Tamne. And they Chavala Tene, and the Ranga Tomame, the one Kabado and the Chicago, the Mikajubu children. And the Antakan Chevakana, Taka Mikajubu children that came and never condition said that Singama, Tomame was a tank. Chicheva Kanama, the Rashika Patan, never condition Sabata, and Tagani and Chicago, the Chico Sodaga Tomata Kawas, Jazilawata Sanga, the Patamalamo, on to some good sort of devil ledger, double chop, Papa Colors, Donna told the Tabajos to and never said them, Sengama, Dingama, Ding, Toma never said, never signed a Janso subject. And Tagani singing Chudre Gage, Lugan Nasa, Singing Tunga, and Jushi Komanova. Long Tile Gyantamja, Condition my Jansos. Kaba the new to Sanje Kuma Tovala, Tamega Nashi, the Gyan Chishi in Baza, Tamega Nashi, Gyantamja Junction Dana, Kanata, Tabaran Jabashi Chadwa Yawashi, so commercial.
And then the light rays begin to emanate from the heart center of the Guru Buddha within, and permeating through every cell of our bodies, from the crown of our heads to the soles of our feet, purifying all negativities accumulated since beginning this time, including all of the 10 non-virtuous actions, how we have contravened the ethics of refraining from those. Again, all of the naturally occurring negativities, as well as all those proscribed by the Buddha, the negativities that we have accumulated through our infractions of the Pratimoksha Bodhisattva or tantric vows, and that the negativities that we have accumulated in this life, in previous lives, in the life previous to that, going back to beginning this time, all disrespect we have shown from our parents to our gurus, the negativities that we have accumulated in whatever capacity, they are completely and utterly purified. That all the sicknesses of body and mind that are interfering with our spiritual practice are purified. The imbalances in the 4 elements or in the channels, winds and drops are completely rectified. That in particular, the issue of ordinary appearance, which is kind of completely slowing us from being able to quickly attain a state of enlightenment, this is eradicated and substituted by pure appearance.
Rangi Shindu Long the Nilegicha, Lama Shaja Sing good Lenji Chicken, Rangi Lut Lama Shaya Sing Kulu Kursu Sansacha. So the Shindu Travel Assembly Nilegicha, Lama Shaja Sing to the Lenji Chicken, so the Assembly Lama Shaja Sing Tula Kursu Sansacha. Rangi Lunga is a Lama Shaja Sang Kusu Tongo, Yeme Kursu, so but what number of Mabcha? When I go to Kursu Sansati, they were talking about the Tetonis Maishi Kursu Sansacha. And Ran Nasaga Netia, no Gyan Tanja Ten. Lama Shaja Sing Tavish to Kusu Samsacha. Tala Lama Shaja Sing Kusu to the Wo Yeme Juvati, Nala Rashim never Samutan, T. Tugala, Lama Shaja Sing, bottom of a Simjaka Tala never partner. Then there and this Simja Tamjala, Lama Shaja Sing read, and it caused the Shuvala Tenet, Ningala Timbala Tenet, and Simja Deda Tamja, and it caused Lama Shaja Sing Kusu to the Wo Yeme Jus. Deda Nesagan. No, the new Gentle and Lama Shaja Sing Tavish to Kusu Samsacha. What I can what in the conversion of water, some jet Tamjag to the Sanje Kuma to Dubne, some jet and the Sanje Salakogi is that you might didn't go to Sutaya was she would choose so what in the conversion.
Then through the combination of my own more subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, together with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of the Buddha. Then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of the Buddha. And then I see that my body, speech, and mind are now inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. This produces a sense of bliss which combines with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of knowing through bliss and voidness. The place that I am in is also purified of all fault and transformed into a pure realm, pure Buddha realm. Then, seeing myself as a fully enlightened being, completely lacking of any inherent existence, I send out light rays from my own heart center equal to all the sentient beings in all of the realms of existence. As they dissolve into the sentient beings, they are spontaneously arise as fully enlightened beings. And the place that they are in is also purified of all taint and fault, and is transformed into a pure realm. And so there is no difference between all of these sentient beings and a fully enlightened Buddha. Again, the place that they are in is purified, and again, I have really rejoiced, and today is the day which this has come about. This is something really, really wonderful.
어떠지? 다 심제 탐제 산제 살을 거바다. 라마샤제 생거 살을 거바다. 아니 대두베도 소소기와 가르사와 대두근 소소도 제바가 유대나 마두가 또베 파다 잠레 섬사티 대와 대외 동바제 대돈니스마 이시께서 섬사체 어떠지? 다 어떠지 공바셰 다다다 메바 이제 자로 문에란다 어다 된데 레라부터 요마데 이내야 단다 삼로 땅완는 신진 림부 마토와 뒤지 시라마고 왔잖아 배 마부 간 조조지 문에 걸었대 용에게는 아니 교류 교와쇼스 거다 되게 용화를 가서 랑산제 고마마도 타면도 와 내가 산제 고마 톱고 와라 아니 랑규라 돈이니지니 보자 람규라 장주사 돈이 또 베셔라 규를 깨고도 와 다들 인바 인자다 내당 근데 차원에 상당히 아니 가다 도다 타마 치와 있네디 자주가서 돈이 되게 싫어게는 교류 교와쇼스 어디는 거 같지
And so, and then this leading of all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment, the virtue that has facilitated that, and myself as the agent of that virtue, all lack any objective existence and are merely imputed by thought. And from this, then my thought produces a sense of bliss which combines with voidness, and again I abide in the wisdom of God through bliss and voidness. And so, this is something, of course, that we are doing on the power of our imagination and aspiration at the moment. It's much more difficult than that, and yet, when we are dedicating, we dedicate really sincerely. So that this will really come about as quickly as possible, and knowing that it is really within my capacity, because it's my thinking that will make it so, that really are able to streamline, purify my thinking, to use every situation to be it good or bad, to enhance my appreciation of and understanding of the mind of enlightenment and emptiness. It's so important, and that this doesn't take a great deal of time. The opportunities are there constantly. We know we must attain the state of enlightenment to be able to fully benefit sentient beings, and therefore it really makes sense to be able to be alive to and aware of every opportunity like this, and therefore to really adjust our thoughts, adjust our thinking quickly and seamlessly, as much as we possibly can.
Liang Bo Jia Ma Pan Jian Yue Jia Jia Pa Yang Ba Miao Ba Yang Do Niao Gong Do Piao Wa Ra Shui Do Nie Da Wan Jian Bo Ma Ba Na Ma Jian Yue Jia Jia Pa Yang Ba Miao Ba Yang Go Niao Gong Do Piao Wa Ra Shui Gang Ria Ra Wei Guo Wei Xin Ge Wan Dia Bian Da Dia Wa Ma Lü Zhong Wei Ne Jie Ria Se Wang Dian Zhen Jia Zuo Ye Xia Bian Si Dia Ba Du Yu Ru Jie Miao Miao Zhe Wei Jie 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 Miao Jie Miao Wong Bo Jia Miao Gai Jie Jie Miao Su Jie Song Gai Bo Lo Zan Zhai Bei Xia Lai So Wan Miao Miao Jia Dia Jia 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 Dia Miao Jia Miao Wong Bo Jia Miao Gai Jian Jia Miao Su Jie Song Gai Bo Lo Zan Zhai Bei Lai So Wan De Miao Miao Jia Dia Jia Jia Dia Miao Jia Bei Wong Bo Jia Miao Gai Jian Jia Miao Su Jie Song Gai Bo Lo Zan Zhai Bei Xia Lai So Wan De
You are of Lakshvara, great treasure, compassionate, not aimed at true existence, and Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception, Salkapa, crown, jewel of the sages of land of snows, Losan Drakpa at your feet, are naked.